Okay, this is an addendum to my lesson on the Pearl Harbor attack. It is I say up here, a super quick World War II backgrounder, right? We're going to focus on Japan and Germany. And it is just, all it is very broad brushstrokes off the top of my head only, right? Roughly about an hour to make this, so I don't want this to be like a big source of debate and attack. I'm not. I didn't even do any research for this. I just, for the background knowledge, just I want to throw down some ideas here, right? Show you kind of the background behind Japan and Germany, right? So we'll start with Japan, and there's a lot of parallels between Japan and Germany here. But looking at Japan, uh, they're facing a key thing they're facing was European colonization of Asia, right? The Europeans were carving up Asia, and that was a threat to Japan. Of course, the first Europeans to go in were the Portuguese, all right? Uh, After Da Gama's rounding of Africa, right? And right away, I mean, they're going for the Spice Island and so forth, right? And so, whatever, right? They're going for the spice, but right away they pushed into Japan in the 16, I don't know, 40 or so, right around there, and pretty quickly they established a Christian mission, right? And unfortunately, those Christian missions back then also had a strong political function, to gain some sort of cultural leverage within that country. Um, and so within about 40 years, the Japanese banned Christianity out of the country. Uh, then the Dutch beat the Portuguese and kind of took over. Then the British pushed their way in. They also pushed into India, and then they had the Opium Wars, right? First one about 1842 or so. And from that, they got a lot of concessions. They opened up Canton area in the south, where Hong Kong is, and they acquired Hong Kong and opened up, I believe, four other trading ports. And then they had the Second Opium Wars, and the French I think it was the French got involved in the Second Opium Wars, and we got involved in that too, I believe, in the Second Opium War. And the French moved into Indochina, southern China, and they took that, all right, as a colonial possession. And about the same time, Russia's pushing into Manchuria, right, and they got all the way to the Pacific and moved down that peninsula, and they established Vladivostok as a warm water port. And even before that, in 1853, Perry is pushing his way into Japan, strong arming his way into Japan, forcing them to sign a trade treaty, right, which was followed by other European nations, right, forcing them Japan to sign these trade treaties. They didn't like that, right? So they're feeling the heat, they're feeling the threat, and they figured that the best way to avoid being dominated by these Western, nations is to become just as Westernized, right? So what they did is in 1867 they had the Meiji Restoration. They call it Restoration because they're putting the emperor back on the throne, and really what it was a break away from the feudalistic political economy, largely centered upon agriculture and these little pockets of warlords and stuff, right? And converting their country into a centralized nation state like the Europeans, right, with a capitalist economy, and then they rapidly westernized to defend against the Westerners. So they sent out, fact finding, studying teams, right, and they adopted the U.S. industrial manufacturing, Wall Street financial markets for capital mobilization, and they copied the Prussian army and Prussian education system. And for Navy, they initially copied the French, and I believe they got some French warships they purchased, and then they purchased a number of British warships, right? Um, and they rapidly industrialized, right? And with that rapid industrialization, manufacturing grew rapidly, and they increased export of manufactured goods, increased their income, and this allowed for population growth, right? So that by 1900, Japan's population that grew to the point where it exceeded its food production capacity, and Japan became a net importer of food, which is a vulnerability. Okay. Now World War One, Japan was allied with the Allies, right? And after the war in 1920, they were given Germany's old colonial island. You know, and they had I guess they had Eastern. I don't know if they're given New Guinea, but Germany had Eastern New Guinea, islands above that, Bismarck Islands. They had some stuff to the east of the Philippines. I don't know. I think like Palau or something like that, right? I know they had islands in the Carolines, and they had one of the Marianas out. They had Saipan, I know, right? So so Japan gets a bunch of stuff, right? It's gifted to them, right? Those are the mandate islands because they're mandated over to them. So after 1900, the population continued to grow, so the population food import vulnerability grew even worse by 1929, and of course by 1929, the Great Depression hits, and in March of 30, following year, the U.S. responded to the Great Depression with a Smoot-Hawley tariff, whopping, just massive monster tariff, over 60%, right? Other nations retaliated with similar high tariffs, and international trade broke down. Well, this spelled trouble for Japan because, they can't sell anything, they can't buy anything. You know, balance of trade is going to break down, and they're going to have a big currency problem, and the situation quickly became critical, especially with food. So in September 1931, Japan manufactured an incident in the Southern Manchurian Railroad. That's their railroad, right? They blew up a portion of their own railroad and they blamed it on the Manchurians, and they used that as a pretext to invade Manchuria. So they weren't going to starve. So they dumped it on someone else when, they're in a bad situation. What do? Well, you're tough luck, right? You don't dump it on someone else. So they should have laid down and died, but they said, well, we're not going to do this, right? So if Japan can't get what it needed through trade, they're going to get it one way or another, right? So Japan set out to become an autarkic economy, go out and conquer stuff, get those resources, and they established their East Asia co-prosperity field sphere, which was kind of ironic and almost kind of funny because there was nothing co about it, right? Yeah, we're all going to share in the wealth. No, I don't think so. Everything's going to Japan here. Um, so the Japanese were scum, dumping it on others, but they probably figured they weren't any worse than the European colonists, which is true. European colonists were brutal, bloody, suppressive, right? Right? Or the expansionist U.S., right? I mean, I know a lot of Americans are going to have problems with this because they don't want to see it, right? But listen, when Japan went into Manchuria to get food, for example, right? It was no different than when we went into the northern territories, right, or whatever, right, right, and kicked out the Indians to expand ourselves. Uh, they were bloody and brutal, uh, you know. That's just the way it was. So now, in 1937, Japan manufactured the Marco Polo Bridge incident to invade China. So they manufactured another, you know, pretext for war. It's something that's classic. It's done by all these nations, right? We do it. Um, Now, in 1940, Japan occupies northern Indochina with permission of the French Vichy government, right? So at this point, what we're looking at, I mean, the threat to the U.S. was being locked out of that autarkic trading bloc that Japan is building up, right? And the worst of that would have been the loss of the China market. But like I said in the last lesson, I mean, the China market never materialized as this, as this fabled, source of wealth and prosperity that we can tap into. All right, it never really panned out for us, even by World War II, right? For a number of reasons. I'm not going to get into that. But it was always anticipated going way back. I mean, in 1850, it was estimated that in the 1850s, it was estimated that Japan's population was 400 million. When we're scratching, single digits back then, right? for our entire country. Um, so I say Japan was a regional threat, right? Now Germany, on the other hand, was a bigger threat. Um, let's take a look at Germany's background here. So German backgrounder, like Japan, you could say the nation state of Japan formed in 1867. Well, the nation state of Germany formed in 1871 with the Franco-Prussian War. All right, kind of fused those principalities together. Now, being formed late, they were a latecomer to the imperial race for colonial empire, and there wasn't much left. They're slim pickings left, right? Scraping the bottom of the barrel here. They rapidly advanced into Africa, some areas on the east, the southeast side of Africa, some areas on the southwest side, right? They grabbed a bunch of Pacific islands, and they were trying to push hard into China, trying to dominate the Shantung Peninsula, right? And I say here, with most of the third world already taken, right, by other nations, Germany focused upon Latin America because Latin America was still kind of virgin territory in a sense because it was protected by the Monroe Doctrine. So, except for like three little territories, French Guyana, Dutch Suriname, and British Guyana, it wasn't colonized because, I guess by 1822, the Europeans were cleared out. Uh, and then Monroe says, okay, you guys stay out. And that was 1823 with the Monroe Doctrine. So the Germans bypassed the Monroe Doctrine. They didn't violate the Monroe Doctrine by formally. They didn't formally colonize any areas in Latin America. But what they were doing is they were had a rapid buildup of implantation of German nationals and rapidly growing business and commercial relations over there. Okay, and that became a key competition to U.S. interests, Wall Street interests. Um, okay, World War One concluded with the Treaty of Versailles, and in this treaty, Germany was blamed. Germany lost, so they were blamed with all the war, and they were really blamed. I mean, they all were, you could say, were equally to blame for World War One. Right? They're all doing the same thing. Now, war rep. Okay, so they're stocked with war reparation payments to pay for the British and French debt to the United States. They also lost a lot of territory, which means loss of resources, and I believe they lost some key coal resources in the east, um, especially with the reconstitution of Poland. So Poland didn't exist for about 160 years, and Poland's remade, taken from Germany and Russia, and including the Polish corridor. So this is something that really pissed off the Germans, that their country split in two, to allow this corridor for Poland to have direct access to the Baltic. Um, and then they had armaments restrictions imposed upon them. All right, so now with these reparations, Germany responded with hyperinflation. All right, and hyperinflation, what it really is the government starts printing a lot of money, right? Right, it's just cranking out the bills, right? And that's really a transfer of wealth, or you can say it's a theft, all right? So the idea is this, right? Let's say there's a billion Deutschmarks out there, right? And then the government says, oh, we got to pay these reparations, so we'll print another billion, right? Now you got a whole another billion of brand new Deutschmarks, okay? It's not funny money. It has equal value as all the other Deutschmarks. And so where does it get its value from? Well, from all the original Deutschmarks, right? So value is stripped away from those Deutschmarks, which means you're losing spending power here, right? And the idea is, you can look at it in terms of, basic market supply and demand. You increase the supply of that drastically, well, you're decreasing the value, right? The price. So you're decreasing the value of the currency. Value is actually being transferred from the old currency to the new currency. And one way of looking at it is Milton Friedman, a guy who I like here. He's a pretty smart guy. He said, hey, when countries do that, when nations do that, when they print all sorts of currency and they cause rapid inflation, what it really is it's a hidden form of taxation. You know, I mean, I'm going to say it's a form of pickpocketing, right? So you're taking basically money out of the pockets of the people and using that to pay for the reparations. Now, what happens is, with hyperinflation, if you have any savings, let's say you got 10,000 Deutschmarks in the bank, right? Well, pretty soon those Deutschmarks can barely buy a loaf of bread, right? All your savings are wiped out. Your spending power is gone. You have massive inflation, right? Economic instability, uncertainty, right? The economy tanks. And then you got the Great Depression to add on top of this. So they're facing this bad situation. Then the Great Depression hits. And then Smoot-Hawley tariff is passed, right? And other countries follow suit. You got these tariff wars. Trade's wiped out. Now think about it. How is Germany going to export excess capital, right? Unless it has a positive balance of trade. It's not, right? So they're in bad shape. Their economy's tanking even worse. Um, Plus, Germany is resource poor. They can't get the resources they need, right? Unless through trade, right? And then on top of that, you have these aggressive currency devaluation, I call wars, a startup, right? To gain a trade advantage, because if you devalue your currency, basically you're lowering your price nationwide, right? And then you got a price advantage of another country, right? Um, so Hitler write so in the midst of this craziness, Hitler writes Mein Kampf, right? And Hitler was crazy himself, right? You read Mein Kampf, you're like, this guy's a madman, right? And I'm thinking, I'm reading, this guy's not that smart. What made him so popular? What made him so powerful, right? So some key concepts he had in Mein Kampf, which is kind of important, is Lebensraum, which means living room. We got to expand, get more room. We got to get what it meant was we got to get more resources, right? And then Ostpolitik was how he's going to expand to the east, right? And he's going to dominate all these Slavic peoples, right? Who he thought were subhuman. The guy was a kook. And then going to Russia, and acquisition of Russia was a key goal of his. All the resources of Russia. And it's critical because Germany, like Japan, is resource poor. Right? No iron ore, no aluminum ore. And aluminum ore, like I say, is important because of like aircraft industry, especially military aircraft. Um, Oil, no oil, and they didn't have enough food, and I capitalized food because this is one of the complaints in Mein Kampf. Right? Hitler's saying, you know, our population has outgrown our food production capacity. Right? So it's a kind of a situation like in Japan, right? And they can't get it through trade, right? Oh, this is what he said. He said, "Hey, you got all these liberal, wimpy economists saying, oh, we should get this through, we can get food through trade." He said, "Screw that, right? That's just weak stuff, right? We need some moral constitution, or I forget what terms he used, but it was like some Nietzschean strongman term or something like that, right? And it was totally Nietzschean, and then we got to go get it, right? And that's what he's going to do, and then guess what happens? Smoot Hawley proves Hitler right. He says you can't. That proves you can't get it through trade. You got to go get it, right? So that was really good. These two clowns here, Smoot Hawley, right? They didn't know what the hell they're doing. All right, so Hitler comes to power, and he immediately stops war reparations. So first thing he does, he comes right. He said, "We're not paying this anymore. Screw you guys." And then he violates arms restrictions, starts rebuilding the German military with the help of Brown Brothers Harriman and Union Banking Corporation, right? Bush Bank there, right? And he develops an autarkic trading bloc, and he starts taking back territory, right? Where do you take back some territory? There's some territory. Where the hell was? There's some territory in the southwest, and then anyway, so then he took Austria, and then he took parts of Czechoslovakia there, and then he moved into Poland, right? So I'm thinking, okay, so he's doing this stuff, right? Now I'm thinking, okay, Hitler. I read Hitler's Mein Kampf, and I'm thinking, this guy's a madman. This guy's not that smart. What how did he rise to power? And I'm thinking, the key thing was he had moxie. You know, he appealed through passion, right? I mean, he wasn't a passionate speaker. You know, I mean, you could see this guy as I don't want to say, as some like, you know, so what do you call those guys? Those preachers who are just like, you know, all in passion and whatever, right? And anyways, what he had was moxie. You know, he comes in and says, "Hey, we're not going to take this anymore. You know, we're not paying this. We're taking back our land." And you know the Germans are saying, "Yeah, yeah, way to go, Hitler. You go." Right? And they loved him. All right. He's a strong man, and they wanted a strong man. In their bad situation, they're looking for a strong man. All right, so Allies appease Hitler, and you know the Munich agreement there, and Chamberlain comes back and says, "All right, we're gonna have peace in our time." You know, Hitler's thinking, "Oh man, that was easy, right? It worked once, we'll do it again, right?" It's just like that movie, was it The Longest Yard? Remember that? Burt Reynolds, right? Ray Nitsky's like terrorizing, you know, he's a linebacker, and then they have a play where they let Ray Nitsky run through the line, and then Burt Reynolds throws a ball, hits him in the groin, you know, he goes down, right? And then they after the play they huddle up again, and then Burt Reynolds says, "Hey, it worked once, it'll work again." So they do the same play, and Nitsky goes is hitting the groin again, and anyways, so Hitler is like, it worked once, it'll work again. He keeps going. Then he pushes and takes Poland, right? And then you know, I'm sure the British and French are saying, "Oh my goodness," right? You know, where's he going to stop, right? So they said enough is enough, and they declare war. And then the Western Europe campaign starts mid May. By June 24th, the Allies are forced to retreat at Dunkirk, and Germany controls all Western Europe, including Spain. Right? Germany launches the Battle of Britain to prepare for Operation Sea Lion, which is the invasion. But that fails by October 31st, right? And then in June of 41, Hitler launches Operation Barbarossa, and Hitler's on his way to fulfilling his Mein Kampf goals here. Lebensraum, Ostpolitik, right? Get those resources, right? And this becomes the real threat to the U.S. Right? I mean, it's a threat before with Western Europe, right? But now it's like it's really getting serious here. All right, so what I say is what's the common denominator here? What are the key things? Well, the key troublemaker are these high tariffs, right? They break down trade, right? And forces these countries to become autarkic trading blocs. They go get it militarily, right? And then they isolate, right? And then you also, on top of that, you have currency wars. And I say, well, okay, this is a big reason why the Bretton Woods Agreement. You know, I mean, there's more than this, but a big reason why is they're looking at things that led to World War II, and they're saying we're not going to have these currency wars again, right? All right, so that I say here, like as a general strategy, no, you don't break down trade. You keep them connected at the hip, dependent upon your market, right? But at the same time, you use the size of the U.S. market as leverage, right? To lever, fair trade deals, right? I mean, you don't want to be a bully and lever bad trade deals for someone else. Like, if you're bad, what you want to do is you want to maximize the volume of trade, right? Going both ways. That's going to maximize your production capacity there, right? Right. Okay, so that's it for that.